Long ago, the most ancient tree man Durthu would broker a deal with a group of elves who were also facing destruction. Durthu had the elf leaders transformed into Orion and Ariel, king and queen in the forest, and their combined might would give rise to the faction known as the Wood Elves. Welcome to the faction rating and mastery guide for Talsyn and Argwlon, and yes, we are going to be covering both of the factions in the same video. They are quite similar and they both start off in Loren, and hopefully this will help you decide which faction to choose by breaking them down across 5 separate criteria, culminating for a total at the end. Starting off with strategy, measuring the faction strengths on the campaign map. Now, normally this is where the factions tend to differ the most, but honestly there isn't too much different from the standard Wood Elf play. I highly recommend checking out my Wood Elf mastery guide for the race as a whole, because this is pretty much the backbone of both of them, but where they differ is primarily under their military and the way you build up to support these units, as well as your geopolitical situation. Orion's faction Talsyn focuses more around elf units and cavalry. Orion's faction has the Wild Hunt mechanic. It removes the cooldown of the world route system, allowing you to fly around the map much quicker. He gains extra underway movement, but also his armies become cheaper for every war you're in. Now I know your immediate thoughts is, Orion, this is total war, declare war on the world and bulldoze it, and listen up, he is the best person for the job if you want to go that way. But in the early game, this doesn't mean you should go around starting wars just to chase some extra upkeep. By rapidly spreading out as a colonizer, this is Orion's greatest strength. Each new forest you deep root to will give you even more enemies. Rather than expanding in a single forest, starting several wars there, instead go to new frontiers. Destroy the enemies there, building up relationships with order-tied factions that can build better defenses, freeing you up to go and discover more lucrative forests. Remember, you can always help your allies out and turn their enemies into landfill if they're having trouble. At very least, this is an excellent passive saving, and at best, if you plan your wild hunts in advance, you will be able to terrorize multiple forests at once, unleashing your discounted armies like seeds of death across the world, spearheaded by a juiced up Orion who can run faster than cavalry, as well as all armies gaining an extra 25% movement upon raising a settlement for the duration of the wild hunt. Orion is centered around that traditional hit and run Wood Elf playstyle. Durthu, on the other hand, he's more centered around the big creatures like trees that are just as old and nasty as he is. If you take Argwylon as your starting faction, Durthu is immune to all attrition types, which is actually really useful. Combine this for 30% reduced upkeep for all forest units, an extra 5% weapon strength faction wide, and even more charge bonus on those tree units, and you will see why this guy is an absolute beast, and Durthu's own army is more powerful in terms of brute force and ease of use. Durthu starts out with a bit more of a dicey start, but he can handle it because he also can recruit ancient treemen at +5 level. Having your strongest lord type start at a higher level is certainly useful, particularly if you have exposed fronts that get attacked, and even just hiring one of these with a couple of support units can batter down armies many times their size. The differences between Argwylon and Talsyn are going to be more pronounced in the other sections, because overall they play the Wood Elf playstyle pretty much to a T. It's all about securing Loren and then branching out to obtain other forests. It's convenient and potent to build up their economy and build towards their preferred military tools, and they both land 4 stars in strategy. Just a quick reminder guys, if you are enjoying the video, please consider liking and subscribing, it really helps out. Ask any question in the comments, I answer everything, and if you'd like to talk strategy, feel free to join the Discord. Cheers. Next we have military, measuring the faction's control on the battlefield, and here we're going to see some of the biggest differences that exist. When you take an outpost with Argwlon, it's probably going to allow the recruitment of dryads. On the other hand, Talsyn are going to build Glade Guard. Talsyn are a traditional elf faction in every way, shape and form. At least for an archer unit, Glade Guard are very competent in melee, and you'll eventually level into Way Watchers and whatever supporting units of your choice. Captains and Way Stalkers prove a very good line holder in the early stages, and of course you want Branch Wraiths to be able to heal in between battles. But the support units you choose really can vary when it comes to Talsyn. Hawk Riders supported by a captain still work very well in the late game, hiring treemen to hold the center and allow your skirmish units to get rear shots. However, at all stages, at least in Orion's army, having some Glade Riders with bows will really do a good job. I would always put between 2 and 4 Glade Riders as missile cavalry in any of Orion's armies, particularly with Hagbane tips, which will slow the enemy down, allowing your arrows more time to work. In between those volleys, they will do 20% extra damage in Orion's army. If you put them with a captain as well, you can increase their melee defense, allowing them to charge in once they run out of arrows and deal some really decisive massive cycle charging. Just to clarify, Glade Riders are a supporting unit. If you're clever enough, you probably could doom stack them, but this is a bit more expensive and I would much more recommend only having 2, at most 6 units in any army, using your powerful Glade Guard as your backbone. On the battlefield, Orion is a flexible hybrid lord, able to hold the line quite well as throw his spear for excellent damage. Honestly, Orion doesn't start as strong as some of his other contemporaries, but given the right investment, he can definitely pull his weight. He has 2 bound area of effect spells which will work very well and can help decide earlier battles. Any Wood Elf lord choosing to increase movement followed by extra sack and raise revenue is really important and will help that economy run. If you're planning on playing very expansive, going down Quartermaster to lower the upkeep of the army really can help, but otherwise you might want to focus on your military. Extra ammunition with Glade Guard can't go amiss, and if you want to have some fun, I do recommend investing in cavalry here. I know this is something you would not have done in Warhammer 2, but it honestly does alright here. The most important one is if you can hold on to these units to level 7, the buffs are very good. Even if you choose different low level buffs, make sure this level 7 cavalry buff is something you get. Make sure you go down Orion's personal line and anything else that improves his area of effect weapons. Both Talsyn and Argwlon have access to the officers, allowing them to put a lord of their choice into there and gain their army some extra bonuses. Talsyn's pretty much revolve around making a particular unit type hit even harder or be even cheaper. On the other hand, Durthu's pretty much reduce upkeep and give some nasty treatment and extra ability. Now let's focus on Argwlon. As legendary lord, Durthu out of the box is incredibly strong. Optimus Treeface will wreck anything you come across in the early game. The tree units at his disposal get an upkeep reduction, meaning you will want to invest in them. While playing as the other elf legendary lords, you could finish a whole campaign only ever touching the treemen, but as Durthu, you absolutely want to revolve around these and you can increase them even more thanks to aspects. This is a simple 150 gold upgrade on any type of tree unit, being dryads, treekin, or treemen. They are either offensive, increasing speed and armor piercing, lineholder, increasing melee defense and anti-infantry, or anti-large, gaining charge bonus versus large. Applying these aspects to different dryads in your army can really help them form a different role. My recommendation would be to make a formation you find works for you and then apply the most appropriate aspects. If in doubt, just go for aspects of the Willow. Yes, you lose a bit of armor piercing here, but +6 melee defense and +6 versus infantry is excellent in the early stages in particular. Treekin are very overlooked and underrated, having a very good melee defense stat as well as over a third of their damage being armor piercing, making them an excellent early game anvil for your dryads to hammer into. Of course, ending up with treemen is going to work out very well for you, but just be mindful of the cost. Just because you can run a doom stack doesn't mean you should. An army only needs to be as expensive as it needs to be to win its engagements, and you don't need 19 treemen to win your engagements. Yes, you only have a few tree units as Durthu, but using aspects and the right skill buffs, you can get a lot out of them. Giving you a balanced army, all your tree units will have fear and be a fraction of the cost. Now, does this mean you completely ignore elf units with Durthu? Well, the answer is no. I would always have at least 4 ranged units standing behind the main line, allowing them to shower arrows in, devastating that leadership even more. Orion's faction certainly has the reach advantage with cavalry and hawk units, but you can also use these for Durthu and vice versa. In addition to lending units, they also lend each other their laws of magic. Both factions can use the almighty life magic, as well as support from high and dark elf magic, alongside beast and shadow. Leveling up Durthu is also quite complicated. Unlike Orion, you might want to forego cost reduction and move more towards your military bite. Ancient Bark will increase your ancient treekin, and while you could increase elf units, if you want to go with the source, get piercing thorns and increase dryad units too. You can get through the entire campaign without hiring a single elf unit, although I would still hire some Glade Guard and Way Watchers to shoot over the front line. The high tier red tree is also very good, allowing you to get Forest Raw to really boost those treekin. And this is on top of Skin of the Woods giving 20% ward save to treekin units. Like all tree lords, he also gets Skewering Branch to increase the armor piercing damage, but he also has the Law of Beast Magic, allowing him to use Flock of Doom for some extra early damage. All of his unique skills are worth getting, usually buffing himself or his tree units even further. Both Durthu and any ancient treeman lords under his faction's control will enjoy a slew of aura based buffs and debuffs. Yes, there's a lot of expertise to be had depending which lord you choose, but but in any situations you're playing defensively, make sure you have your heroes which buff their output in forest battles. Each faction can piggyback off the advantages of each other, as well as use life magic to be able to herd and deal devastating damage with dwellers below, as well as heal themselves between every battle. They certainly offset and complement each other more than anything else and get 4¼ stars for military. Next we have geography, which is the faction's location and ability to traverse it. And the answer for this is, of course, it's complicated. They do lack the ability to reach out with their very meager outposts, but effective use of diplomacy will really negate this. Yes, you are centralized around your forest, and your primary goal is to secure the heathlands either by holding it, raising it, or passing it to a military ally. Once you've secured this area, you just simply move on by the underroutes to get to a new forest, rinse and repeat, but you both start in Loren, and this is a huge advantage. It's very defensible, has very few entries, and this is the economic heart for your entire faction. If anything does get in there, they've got to deal with your meaty forest garrisons, and everything that tries will tend to regret ever doing so. Yes, mountains are nearby, but you have the ability to underpass and not be inhibited, and you can easily set devastating ambushes in the forest for anything that ever gets close. With smart use of diplomacy and military, you should have no problem with geography, and the occupants of Loren land 4½ stars. Next we have diplomacy, which measures the faction's ability to choose its engagements, and this is where Orion and Durthu really differ. Orion starts in the south, giving him a great opportunity to befriend Talsyn, and his biggest challenge involves keeping Durthu from declaring war, as well as Belagar in the south doing the same. If you can use gifts and joining wars and other smart ways of placating both of them, you're in a good way. A smart Orion player can really control and manipulate the situation better than any other Wood Elf faction. Almost immediately you'll be able to sign non-aggression and trade agreements with the two minor Wood Elf factions, and this gives you just a little bit extra pocket money to play with. Due to not encroaching on any of the Empire's early borders, you shouldn't have any problem with them, but your main goal with both of these guys is to get the Oak of Ages up to level 2 first to get the 2 Confederation quests. You can quite easily attack Broken Axe to get 3 wins there for greenskins, as well as either Paravon or Baston to get 3 Brettonian wins, which will give you the other settlement via Confederation. This is integral to your early economy, and your early play should revolve around getting these. Orion also benefits from having Claw immediately south of him, as you can just underpass and get 3 wins against Skaven. Make sure you do this after the Oak of Ages is at tier 3, and you will confederate the Sisters of Twilight and get Ariel. Put some effort into fast tracking the Ritual of Rebirth over there, and you will get Ariel in your army. Put her in Orion's army, and this will grant you Guardian. As Orion, if you've managed to keep Durthu on your good side, you've bought yourself enough time to get 3 Dwarven wins. The dwarves immediately north of you are prime for this. If that doesn't work, just underpass to the Forest of Gloom. There's plenty of neutral dwarfs over there. Try not to annoy any major factions. For Durthu to get his final confederation, yep, he needs to get Orion, and that requires 10 unique settlements to be sacked or raised, and that can take a bit of time, but that's okay. I would recommend not rushing this, it will just happen. This locality does mean that you will unite Loren a bit slower than Orion, but the one advantage is you get a quest to confederate Draka. Now this isn't something you'd really want in the early game, because that forest will take a lot of money and investment to keep safe, whereas Loren will keep itself safe. Just note, Orion and any other faction can confederate Draka the old-fashioned way, just lots of money and gifts. Again, don't rush this, it'll happen, she'll survive. Durthu particularly really benefits from getting his economy up and going, and that's because his diplomatic start is a little bit more challenging than Orion's. He's not quite as well liked as Orion, and you will find yourself bordering the Empire and quite possibly nearly going to war with them. Now you can stop this, and you absolutely should. Once you've cleared the initial dwarves, underpass back and attack Paravon, hold that settlement because it's a heathland, then attack Baston, gifting those settlements to the Empire, send some gifts, and make sure you land non-aggression with Karl Franz. Avoid conflict with any of the Empire, but if they do, the minor factions probably won't attack you. If they do, destroy their army and then just ignore them. Again, if Geld declares war, just ignore him. Over time, things will calm down for peace, but Karl Franz is absolutely the one you cannot have declare war. There just won't be a short-term solution. On the other side of the forest, quite similar, try to keep the major Brettonian factions alive, healthy, and on side, and destroy any small ones that get in your way. I mean, if you can keep them as trade partners, even better, because all of your economic buildings will develop tradable resources. If you're going to have custodians of the outer perimeter looking after the world for you, you need to keep an eye on them and bankroll them as needed. If you see their balance of power fall down or them lose a settlement, absolutely give them a couple thousand gold so they can rebuild their armies. By continually bankrolling a winner, you're keeping that relationship strong, strengthening your own borders, and preventing yourself getting tangled in conflicts which don't actually earn you terrain that makes you any long-term cash. But that said, if they're really losing, join in the conflict because raising can earn you a boatload of cash. Just remember, once you stabilize a forest, your job is to deep root to the next forest, bring a full stack there, find yourself an ideal Autotide faction to bankroll and make them the perimeter and help you secure the area. In terms of the Sisters of Twilight and Draca's forest, they will be covered in more in depth under their own guides. The Wood Elves can get buffs to diplomacy thanks to the intruders that enter their forests, and you should absolutely prioritize these as well as the technologies you can develop. Arguably no faction has benefited more from being able to sack a settlement, occupy it, and then gift it to someone else. For the Wood Elves, that outpost will now be transformed by your ally into a full-fledged fortress. They really are the gold standard in diplomacy and get 4 3/4 stars. Finally, we have economy, measuring the faction's prosperity and growth, and the Wood Elves, they do start off a bit slower, but this is something that they don't really feel in the case of Talsyn and Argwylon. Being so defensible, they don't need to spend much on lots of armies early on, and you're very easily able to confederate the 2 minor factions, giving you a total of 3 forests in no time at all. Prioritize the 3 economic buildings, giving you a sleuth of tradables, extra growth, and extra gold. The council positions offer some unique army compositions which can result in some fun builds, as well as reduced upkeep. Bladeguard are very dependable in the early game, and in the case of Durthu, his reduced cost on Dryads, Treekin, and Treemen make this a heavy hitting army that will always punch up in terms of its cost. Intruders that enter the forest pretty much give you money, Rituals of Rebirth will feed you even more armies for you to trash, and if an ally ever needs some help, or you just want to expand and go on a tear, sacking and raising will earn you an absolute fortune. Ensure you don't spend too much on military, prioritize the economic buildings, and plan ahead diplomatically, and you will have no problem with money at all, landing 4 1/4 stars in economy. Overall, both factions earn a total of 88% overall, so they both operate quite similar in terms of their strength. If you prefer the more nimble skirmish style of build, which is maybe more traditionally Wood Elf, then Orion is your man. On the battlefield, if you like lots of big heavy hitting units that really smash down a melee, then Durthu. But on the campaign map, there's also some subtle differences. Durthu's diplomatic situation is far higher risk, but it's far easier to manage. On the other hand, Orion is far less risky, can get easier confederations, but will require a bit more work and savvy on the diplomatic front. Overall, I would have to say Durthu is probably easier for a first time run, but if you're a Total War veteran, Orion might be a bit more enriching and more engaging of a campaign. While neither of these factions have the Forge of Death or some of the other stronger abilities of their cousin factions, by starting strong in the Wood Elf heartland of Loren, they absolutely dominate. And that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you have found it helpful, please consider liking and subscribing. Discord in the description. Comment any questions, I answer them all. And this is Elven Plot Armor. See you next time.